Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessi Nealand and this is my new Q&A series, Jessi's Mailbag, where I answer questions and you can leave me a question if you want me to answer it in another video using the link in my caption. Today I'm going to be talking about mental health because some of the questions that I got sort of all in the same category here. One was, how do you care for yourself as someone taking on the problems of so many others? Totally fair question. And a whole bunch of references to my mental health and how I tend to it. Um, yeah, just sort of how I manage it, things I struggle with, mental health tips, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm going to be answering that. So this is an interesting question because I would say that I've learned a lot about mental health over the last couple of years, and so the sort of language and identification that I use now is slightly different than it would have been if I had made this even a year ago, definitely 2 years ago. So my understanding at this point is a little bit more clinical and a little bit more informed by a sort of formal method of, as my little brother said, that I was really formally embracing my depression about a year ago. So yeah, I mean that is what I'm doing. I'm on antidepressants right now. I'm diagnosed with depression. I'm a depressed person. And that's been a real wild ride. Honestly, it's been a real trip because when I first, even honestly, I was like talking to people about how numb I felt and how I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't think of the last thing that had excited me, and I couldn't remember how to feel joy. And it was like I was saying all these things to people who were like, it really sounds like depression. And I was like, yeah, I know, like, nah, depression. Am I right? But I really didn't think of it as something that was clinical. I thought of it as like, yes, a pandemic has hit and things are really hard and like, life is difficult. And I got to a point where I was reaching out. I was doing like online telehealth surveys. And so I was filling them out and I did two different services and both of them marked me or whatever, as like severely depressed. We recommend meeting with a provider and, trying antidepressants. And I was like, oh my God, it's clinical. Like this is a real clinical thing. Like I'm not just sad. I have a problem, and there's a whole world of solution. And so I had never taken any psych meds before. I'd never, honestly, I mean, I had considered it, I guess, but sort of in a very vague way. I'd never really thought about how that process works. I've worked with tons of people who have been on them, and I'm very, very pro antidepressants and medication as needed, but I had never been in a position where I realized, like, I needed help so badly. And so I reached out and I got a provider and I started working, and now it's been like a year. And it's been horrible in some ways, like really, really difficult to find meds that work, that are both effective and don't have side effects. And it's been really, really great, both in terms of I'm a ton more functional. I feel a lot better. And I've learned a lot about the entire process. For example, I had no idea that when you go to a provider and like you start talking about how you feel, um, that like so I had no idea about a lot of things. First of all, I didn't know that your provider who prescribes for you is often not the person who is going to be your therapist. So the person who's prescribing for you often doesn't have much of your story, and so you have to really figure out how to advocate for what it is that you need and what you want and what you're feeling, because they're not necessarily going to go in and do a whole lot of digging. They'll take your word for it. They'll read your little survey or whatever, and they'll be like, you're depressed. How does that show up? Here's a couple of questions to vet other things. Here's a medication we can try. And then, like, you are the determinant for whether or not that medication worked. There is no way to prove that, like, the side effects are bad enough to switch or not bad enough to switch. There's no way to prove that it's working well enough to stay on it or not well enough to try something else. All that stuff just comes down to you. And so I personally was like pretty floored by the fact that this is such an untalked about world where you really have to know yourself. You really have to be willing to advocate. I cannot tell you how many clients I now realize that they're like on medication that doesn't work for them. And I'm always thinking like, that sucks that your medication doesn't work. You went out of your way to go get antidepressants and here you are still depressed. And a lot of times the answer is because they couldn't figure out how to advocate properly in a space where someone was just saying yes or no, keep going, or do you want to have another phone call? Or like, do you want to meet again to like talk about alternatives? And people are just like, no, that's okay. It's fine. It's mostly working, or, it's kind of working, or the side effects aren't that bad. And the problem with that is it plays into my exact clientele, feeling like, insecure about that kind of stuff, really not knowing how to speak up, not knowing how to put language to what they're experiencing, not knowing how to advocate for what they deserve, So they'll be like, yeah, sure, like I have headaches all the time and I have no libido, but like, at least I feel better. Like, that's pretty good. I'm like, oh, did you talk to your provider about that? And they're like, no, that's fine. Or they'll say, I don't feel much better, but I don't want to like inconvenience my provider by going back and saying we got to try something else. So let me tell you, in the last year, I've tried a freaking ton of different things. Obviously, most of them didn't work. That's why I tried so many. Some of them, because it's a slow moving thing, you kind of got to give certain things like a month, 2 months, 3 months sometimes to be like, yeah, that didn't work. Because antidepressants in particular, they take a while to build up in your system. So I tried stuff for a long time that didn't work. And I look back and I really wish I knew more about this then, because what I've learned since is I waited way, way too long on a medication that wasn't helping my depression. Before making the switch. And that first one was called Wellbutrin. For those of you who are interested, it's a great medication for so many people, but it wasn't for me. It was bringing out irritability, hostility, anger. Like, it was really making me a nasty version of myself, but I couldn't really totally put that together until after I stopped, and I all of a sudden was like, oh my God, I thought I was just an angry person again, and I'm not. So super frustrating. But that's the thing, it's like subtle, and it kind of sneaks up on you, and you're like, I've been snapping at my partner a lot, or like I've been really irritated. Like, there would be things I would like trip over a rug edge or something, and I would like see red. I would like lose my mind. I was so angry, and I would be hostile, and I would like, it was so frustrating. I would be really irritated all the time, and I couldn't tell you why. I wasn't able to like necessarily see clearly through it, and I stayed on that for a long time, even though it was barely helping my depression, because I was really hopeful that it would work and that it would just take more time, and my provider had said give it more time, and so I did, and I wasted a lot of time not feeling better. And after that, I got onto SSRIs, which are the sort of main form of antidepressants. Wellbutrin is something else, I don't remember, but different category or classification. Oh, and also I was having panic attacks on the Wellbutrin, so that was another thing. I had anger, irritability, hostility, and anxiety and panic. So it was really rough time. So I started to feel better, but then I had to mess with the SSRIs because I was having side effects that were like making me so sad that it was kind of counteracting the fact that the antidepressant was working. And then we were sort of adding other things here and there to support the side effects, like, when I was feeling anxious, I got prescribed different things to try to help with the anxiety and the panic attacks, which were only a side effect of the medication that I was on, to try to help with the depression. So this is, honestly, it's a mess. And I did not realize what a mess it was. And I now have so much passion for helping people advocate for themselves in these spaces, because, like, I learned a lot. And I would go to my provider and be like, here's what I think. And they would honestly mostly be kind of dismissive and be like, well, we can try it. And like, I mean, basically I just wanted to feel better, right? Like, I didn't want to be the one coming up with all the ideas. I didn't want to be the one complaining. I hate having to be like, it still didn't work. Can we try something else? Still didn't work. I hate that for me, let alone, inconveniencing my provider or whatever. It's just a really frustrating situation to be like, yep, another month, another med, didn't work. Let's try again. So at this point, I'm like doing okay. I'm coming off of a thing that we tried that didn't work and had side effects and blah, blah, blah. But my main antidepressant is working, and I do feel a lot better in general. I still have a lot of low days, and those low days are horrible. But I also have a lot of very normal days and occasionally good days, which feels a lot more like normal life. But my dark days are still way darker than they ever used to be pre-depression, so that's how I know it's still sort of around. And yeah, I would say that looking back over my history, I've probably had a long history of depressive tendencies. Like, I've had other eras of my life that were really depressive, and other eras of my life that were really, really euphoric. And I've been like looking into the soft bipolars and what that means to possibly have what my provider calls a bipolar flavor to my depression. And yeah, so all of these are things that I've just had to like learn on the fly and figure out as we go along. And now that that's in place, I am starting work with a therapist soon to hopefully get to the heart of some of this stuff, which honestly for a long time I needed the chemical support before I could get to the emotional support. I was like, yeah, that was tough. So I'm writing a book right now, and I'm like running my business and I'm trying to live my life, and I sleep a lot, and I have a lot of like mental fog days and stuff, even on days that I feel okay emotionally, that's still there. So the thought of adding in like intensive therapy just felt like too much. Now I would say, a little while back I reached out to someone because I felt like I had the capacity to like add that to my life finally. And I'm excited about that because I fully recognize like meds are not the solution. Meds are the bridge. Meds are the life raft. And now that we've got that up and running, I can say, yeah, like I have work to do. Depression doesn't depress for no reason. There is something in there, and I have a pretty good idea of what that needs to be fully dealt with. And I can't say I'm looking forward to it. In fact, I would avoid it for the rest of my life if I thought I would be okay. But as a means to an end, to kind of get out of this depressive episode, I think it's going to be really, really crucial. So that's my mental health, is like I am fully in the battle against depression the last year and a half. I've never been in anything like this before. Like I said, I've had depressive episodes. I can see those eras of my life that were really low in general, but none of them were like this. None of them were like the massive drowning darkness and sadness that I will feel still even now on my dark days. And it just like lifts. There are full like there are entire days where I can't connect to that at all. I'm like, what was I complaining about yesterday? I feel like I was so sad yesterday, but I can't remember why. And as far as like habits go to support it outside of medication, I mean, I do all of the stuff you're supposed to do. Like I try to get exercise. Um, I try to get fresh air. I try to socialize even when I feel like isolating. I try to eat fairly healthy for brain health. I try to do all the things and all the self-care and keep an eye on my red flags, which, like, for me, when I slide into the dark, I'd say probably the first thing that I really notice is that, like, showers kind of disappear for a few days at a time, and I'm like, no. Oh, I'm in the dark. And it gets worse before my period, so there's, like, a hormonal component to it as well, and I mean, it's a struggle. It's a struggle some days a lot, and other days I'm just a person. So I would say that that has been my mental health battle. I do a lot of management around it, and for the most part, I would say it's about as effective as it can be, given that there's a certain aspect to depression that's like it's just gonna do what it wants to do. Like it's here for a reason. I haven't healed that thing yet, whatever it is. But I'm doing everything I can in the middle, and a lot of times that's just the best we got. So um, I am very lucky, I think, that the anxiety that I experienced was almost exclusively a side effect to medication. I don't get a lot of anxiety in its own right, but I do sometimes get really anxious about the amount of sad that I feel. So there is sometimes a very stressful or anxious component to my depression, which is sort of interesting as well. But knowing people who have real anxiety, I can say that I'm lucky that that isn't a big piece of it. So yeah, that's my story with mental health. I'm always evolving, so like this hopefully won't be relevant or true in whatever amount of time when you're watching it, but this is how I'm starting 2022, and this is where I'm at, and I have intentions all up the wazoo about doing everything I can to manage it a little bit better and stay a little bit healthier. I know that for me, movement and socializing are two really important ones, so those are my priorities. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm just like everybody else, sort of navigating COVID stuff and working from home and coming up with new ways to feel supported amidst all of the context that is our world right now. And that's it. I hope that this was helpful for you. I am happy to answer anything personal or professional. If you go to the link in my caption, you can leave me a question there, and I will sort through those questions as I make these videos, and maybe I'll answer yours. Again, thank you for watching. I am so happy to have you here. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.